Thank you very much for joining us on Economy Next today for another of our interviews. Which in one of the ways which we are covering the parliamentary general elections of 2020. As you know, it's a very crucial election. There's been the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is way ahead, we believe, because of the resounding victory of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the presidential elections last year. But things have changed. It's taken a long time. The interval between the presidential election and the parliamentary election is longer than usual. So today, we are very pleased to have Tharaka Balasuriya as our guest today, a third-generation politician and State Minister of Welfare in the caretaker government. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Balasuriya.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to ask a question from you, which you have been asked many times before, but let me try to frame it differently. Many journalists refer to you as a younger politician, a new generation of politicians. Now, you've been educated in the United States and, of course, in Europe as well. But you know that two of the most successful presidents of our modern era have been your age, 46, 47, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. So how does it feel for someone like you to know that you may have to wait for another 20 years to have a shot at national leadership?
Well, I don't really think about 20 years ahead for starters, but I think it also baffles me that everybody refers to me as a young politician when I'm like 47, and then the trend in Europe has been that the state leaders and ministers have been what they now consider maybe even too young, probably in their 30s. Let's say countries like the Scandinavian countries, they have a lot of ministers within the 30 to 40 range. But I think politics works in Sri Lanka is that the first timers are now given a lot of opportunity. But I also feel that that has changed to a certain degree with Gotabaya Rajapaksa becoming the president. Usually, like a first time MP is not given a portfolio, and then the next time he gets into parliament, he is given a deputy ministry. And then you have to rise up your ranks, then become a state minister, and then to the cabinet or whatever. But as a first-time MP, I was given a state ministry, so I was quite pleased with that. And not only me, that there's a lot of first-timers who were given state ministries by Gotabaya Rajapaksa government. And I think there is a move towards what I quote unquote what I call young, or what media calls young. So I think it's a good thing, because when you have energy and when you have the enthusiasm to wanting to make changes, that the opportunity be given at that correct time. So I think after maybe if you stay long years in politics, invariably you get maybe disillusioned, and then discouraged by certain things. So I think it's a trend in the more in the correct direction.
Yes, I mean, in this election there are 1.2 million new voters. And this is a crucial thing, I think, that all the political parties must be trying to reach out to. I mean, some politicians I've spoken to have told me, we don't know how to reach out to these people. What would your message be to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that's why I think the policy in calling me young or whatever, when there's a whole new generation, like I don't know what generation is this now, Generation C or whatever. Then the behavior habits are very different to let's say my generation people's behavior habits. They don't seek they want to feel more experiences, and then they are not in pursuit of vehicles or cars or things like that. So I think the generation X, Y, Z, or whatever the generation what now it's being called.
Yeah.
Different powers.
Yes, you're referring to younger prime ministers, and I have a daughter same age as as one of the Scandinavian prime ministers. So let me just move on to
Oh,
yeah, let me just move on to something more serious. That is the COVID situation, how COVID has overshadowed the campaign. The our country, Sri Lanka, at the hands of this government, has performed in a way that is better than many countries of the world. We have a very low death rate, low infection rate in some ways, and but was it? Is it? Do you think that it was wise to have a slogan to say "COVID Jagat"? We who have beaten COVID, because you never know with this virus, it might come back, and that might upset your campaign. Do you think that is a possibility?
uh, you know, book by uh, Albert Camus called The Lapis. And in the book, there's like a fitting ending where the hero of the novel, Doctor Who, and everybody's celebrating this, the Moroccan town where they have this virus which has spread, and then at the end of the doctor is like, he's not completely thrilled about people celebrating. So yes, and also because history has shown that these viruses come in waves, and now everybody's saying that this is the second wave. This is not actually the second wave. This is just that one patient got away, and then and then it spread among the society. But I mean, we don't know whether the virus will mutilate, and in how many forms it will come. I think like during the plague in the Great Plague, the Black Death, uh, it originated in Europe and then it spread to Russia, and then it was there for about 25 years. So, but I also feel that there's an unprecedented amount of like global attention on COVID, and unprecedented amount of resources being used to find a cure. So I am hopeful that we within we will find a cure, and then and as life will go on as normal.
Yes, and that leads us to my next question.
But yeah, to a certain
Yeah.
I do agree that we can't say that we can't say that. Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can I hear you? Have you lost? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly agree with you that it is well too premature to say that COVID Jayagatta or whatever, because this is a long drawn process.
Yeah. So now the economic impact of COVID has been very serious. We also were not economically very stable when your government came into power, right? So COVID has made things worse. Now, what do you think at a macro level? What do you think your government is planning to do to pull us out?
Well, for starters, I think like if you look at our income sources, the garment sector, the profits have dropped from about 30 to 40%, and then the worker remittance will come down. There's about 50,000 workers who wants to come back, and then also I don't see the tourism industry reaching its full potential unless you find a cure. So of course our incomes are going to reduce. So at least as a temporary measure, we will have to have certain import restrictions, and I think that will be in a maybe a blessing in disguise, because which we can activate the local economy, and then also get the local the people in the country to produce certain goods. Now activating the local economies is not the same as going to the economic policy planning that was there in 1970 to 77. So I'm not saying that you need to put economic restrictions on everything. Yeah, certainly, let's take things such as like, machinery and all that. You can't put you in order to keep the economy moving forward, you need to make sure that you get the machinery and heavy equipment and all those things. But in certain things, I certainly see that we need to use import restrictions. And I think last month, for the first time since 77, our exports have surpassed our imports. So, and we also need to have the stable currency, and then I think the government will find it difficult in the current context to raise money from international markets. So it will be a very challenging time for whatever government that comes into power.
About your own district, Kegalle has a mixed economy. It has some plantation, quite a bit of plantations, and it has agriculture, and it has a little bit of industry. So, how do you think that has impacted, and what would you be telling your constituents? This is our economic plan. This is how it's going to help you.
Yeah, I think Kegalle, if you look at Kegalle's economy, we have I think probably the highest the poverty index. If you exclude the districts from north and east, a large part of it is that ours is an agri-based economy. So let's say when there's things such as exportation, which was introduced during the last government, the livelihood of a lot of people living in Kegalle got affected. So the agri industry alone won't be enough to get us out of to look at strategic locations and bring certain industries into Kegalle. And also, and this is also a bit of a surprise, but Kegalle has one of the best, educated. If you look at the national figures for education, Sri Lanka, Kegalle is one of the districts which is quite high on the list. So one thing which we see is also there's a lot of migration from Kegalle to other districts when they get employed, when they find employment in Colombo or in other areas. And another area which we are looking at developing is that both the Pinnavalla and the Kitulgala areas, which has a vibrant in Pinnavalla and doing is creating activities, more activities in those areas, so that gets going, that we will be able to convert those tourists into overnight tourists. So if we can do that, if we can convert them into overnight tourists, I think then there'll be some dollars flowing into Kegalle. And one concern which we have is that once the Colombo Kandy highway gets going, whether Kegalle will get more isolated, because so that we have already addressed that issue with the president. But certainly we need to bring at least like one or two universities into Kegalle, basically to develop the agri sector using technology, which is also in the president's manifesto. And in addition, I think the infrastructure development, especially in Tungkor, like in areas like Mali border and all that, the roads are disaster. So we need to get the infrastructure development. And also, I think, like a lot of people might not know this, but Kegalle is absolutely a beautiful district. Some of the locations. So I think, there's like huge potential for things such as tourism. I remember, once I, visited Bali, and then everybody was talking so, how beautiful Bali is, and I was like, so surprised that I was thinking to myself, this doesn't come anywhere close to, some of the scenery which I see in Kegalle. So I think there's a lot of potential, yeah, and certainly, like, in order to reduce poverty through the ministry which I had, this Ministry of Social Security, we want to bring in the cluster villages where they produce one thing, or they grow one thing. And if they grow one thing, we have already come into agreement with, like Hills and Cargills, and then we were also negotiating with Expo Lanka to get into forward agreements with them. And then if they produce something, which is, let's say now, for example, in Kegalle, they is famous for Kitul Hakuru. So if you now we see there's a market for that in Colombo, whatever. So we have signed up with Daras, and then we are also looking at signing up with other online organizations which sell products. So that way, we believe that, especially with the increasing youth numbers, we believe that the online marketing will be one of the key components in commerce in future. So we want to lay the platform. So in 4 or 5 years' time, that it will really take off.
Kegalle is also multicultural, multilingual, and you have quite a mix of communities in Kegalle. Your party, particularly the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, is seen as a Sinhala nationalist party by the minorities. Particularly, some of your leaders have said, "Look, we don't need minority votes to win." Now, how do you deal with that? As I said earlier in the interview, you're a third generation politician. Your grandfather, your father, your mother, and now you. Your family is very well known in that district. How do you deal with the minority communities when you're a SLPP contestant?
Yeah, no, actually, I think, none of my colleagues have ever said that, we don't need the minority votes. I don't think any politician will say they don't want any votes. So that will be a very, a foolish statement to say that, if they say that they don't want any votes, whether minority or not. But certainly, yes, we have an identity with, as a single Buddhist party, and I think, every country should have some sort of an identity. So in that, if you look at Singapore, for example, then they came up with the shared common values concept, which basically try to find an identity with the Confucian ideology. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having an identity with with the cultural heritage of more than 2,000 years. But the issue is that, if you use that to discriminate or to put other communities at a disadvantage, that's not the idea of having a cultural identity. So, but as far as Kegalle is concerned, I think, there has been all communities have lived in harmony to a great extent until few incidents took place recently. So, but I think, as far as the estate Tamil the workers are concerned, I think we need to address that community largely because they are probably the biggest community which is living in poverty. So and then so we need to really look at addressing the needs of the estate Tamil community. I mean, if you look at, if you go to the estates, there are still people living in this line rooms or whatever, like a 10 by 10, 10 by 10 room where 2 or 3 families are still living together, which is, beneath human dignity at this day and age. This is the 21st century, and everybody should have be given a small piece of land, and they should have the opportunity to live with self-respect. So, but as far as I think, I always say this: like the Yapalna government, they were talking so much about reconciliation, but at the end of the last 5 years, was the country at a better situation at the beginning of at the 2015, or was the country at a worse situation in 2020 when the Yapalna government lost? So I certainly think, as far as the communities, communities go, that by 2020 it was at a worse situation. So there are differences between cultural differences and religious differences, but we need to really appreciate it. Look, nobody's going to, I think, we are not going to have a situation where everybody's going to, like what the Yapalna government preached, that everybody's going to be holding hands and then singing Kumbaya, together. I mean, I certainly believe that people have inalienable rights, and those rights should be secured, and those rights go beyond the power of government. And so I think what we need to, if we inculcate that people need to live with respect and dignity, I think reconciliation will come. And also we need to have more interaction between the communities, and we need to, that interaction can be cultural, that interaction can be through commerce. Let's take areas like Maunal, there's a lot of interaction between communities through commerce. And then also that interaction can be through things such as sports, where there are shared values. But I think that emphasis on single Buddhism as a guiding force or whatever, and going beyond that to discriminate certain communities will be completely opposed by my part.
One of the things that arose from the COVID campaign, shall we say, is that the Muslims, the COVID victims who were Muslims, were cremated, which were against their wishes. Have you ever been confronted by a constituent who is a Muslim to say, "Look, this is really wrong. We are opposed to this. The WHO allows burials, and why is this happening to us?"
Yeah, no, actually, I haven't really dug into that too much, to be honest. But I think the government's decision at that time, when they took that decision, was that we didn't know that we will be very successful in keeping the death toll to 11 deaths so far. So I think if the number of deaths, the number of deaths exceeded like or hit the figures of other Western countries, certainly I can understand the justification in refusing burials, because at this juncture, I think the government's main concern is, yes, I know that the Muslims might have been inconvenient, but we are also talking about how many deaths out of the 11. I think 3 or 4 only. 3 or 4 are only Muslim people who had died of COVID. So the greater concern, the greater concern is the rights of the living than the rights of the dead. I mean, I don't want to sound like very arrogant when I say that, but I think we need to, in a situation like when you have a virus which is threatening your whole existence, you need to take a bit of a utilitarian approach and look at what is best for the community. And now, so I would think that this is not a the way I see it is this is not a major cause of concern. Because now let's take if it's something like with the expatriate crowd, why are we not bringing in the expatriates at the rate which we want to? Well, for one thing, we need to make sure that before they come, they are tested, and all that. Some countries don't provide those testing facilities. But the primal concern is that if we bring them in large numbers, that the country might get affected. So yes, I mean these are hard decisions to make. But I think when a virus is pretty much has overtaken the entire world, we need to look at when taking certain decisions. We need to look at from the utilitarian aspect of the welfare of the society, and not from not necessarily from the individual rights of one or two people. So I think the government took the correct decision in that aspect.
One of the things that came out also during COVID was an attempt to do distance education in Sri Lanka, to see whether we could keep the lessons going for the children online. Now, while in Colombo and maybe in a few other places, the bigger schools, the private schools, were able to keep the children engaged online, the Learn Asia, which did a study and made an attempt to do some distant education, we found that there was a huge divide, that only 28% of the children had any kind of access to the internet. So what are we going to do? What do you think should be done? Because this is a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it makes such a big difference if a child has access to the internet and those who don't have.
Yeah, true. I agree, but necessity is the mother of invention. We haven't even been talking about online teaching or whatever before COVID. At least not to this extent. And I mean, not only distance learning, but things such as for the workforce, work from home kind of thing. Or chats and interviews and all that before COVID. So these are certain things which has to go beyond COVID. What we feel is that distance learning is maybe a temporary alternative. So for a short period. But what we really would want to do is get the kids back into school as soon as it's safe for them to be back in school. But also, let's say now you see that like these tuition classes all over in the country. So maybe a step forward going beyond the COVID is also maybe after let's say we find a vaccine for COVID or something, after the COVID crisis, to explore with, let's say, if a poor person, the poor person doesn't cannot afford to go for have tuition classes or whatever, then see whether is there a possibility to do online teaching. One area is that I think Gotabaya Rajapaksa in his manifesto has pointed out that one thing is the connectivity. We need to have more facilities like 4G coverage, and then coverage, and a lot of a lot of people even in Kegalle are engaged in the information technology, and they make some money through things like the Fiverr and all these the internet organizations, doing little programming and all those things. So in order to do that, also we need to have the better coverage, and of course we need to, as you correctly said, give them the facilities of having a tab or a phone, or having a computer at home. So I think that will continue by this government, but I don't see that online in learning as a it's probably a complementary tool for it should be used as a complementary tool in the future, not as an alternative. So, but what we really want to see is the kids getting back to school, and then where they can interact with other kids, and then it'll be more. Not just like learning the text, not learning what's in the books, but also more classroom interaction with other kids.
Yeah. So finally, at the end of the life of the last parliament, there was a lot of disappointment among the people about the MPs, about their behavior and their general characteristics, the kind of what people saw on live television from Parliament, and they said we don't want the 220, these 225, or so people thought. But many of you are contesting again, and and others, the younger people, are calling for reform in the system. What kind of reform would you like to see in the electoral system to improve it?
Oh, that's a long answer. All the reforms which I, envisage, I think that'll take, hours to discuss. But certainly, I think,
Briefly, how can you say briefly? Yeah.
but the things I would like to see electoral reforms. I think, now people say things such as, the quality of the speeches by the parliamentarians of yesteryears were much better and all that. But then they had time. They had to. We need to understand the role of the politician, and the role of a politician is multidimensional. It's not just going to parliament and going to, making speeches or doing activity, but there's also an element where you need to interact with your constituents. In some countries, let's say in US, like 300 days or something they spend in Washington, but that's not the nature of politics in Sri Lanka. So when you have a district, it's very difficult to cover, let's say, like traditional things such as going to funerals and all that. Yeah, I probably spend something like 6 hours or 7 hours a day, going to funerals. Now, some might see that as a waste of time, but essentially, if you are a politician and then you don't interact with your constituents, then you're missing something. And then also, by going to funerals, then you see the state of the roads, and then you maybe by communicating for a few minutes, you understand their pressing issues such as the cost of living, or if the rubber prices are down, whatever they'll be complaining to you. So that interaction, I think, needs to be there. You can't have parliamentarians who are just in Colombo and then who don't interact with their constituents. But the area of coverage is the issue. Now the 6 or 7 funerals, or let's say if I go for 6 or 7 funerals, and if it takes like 4 or 5 hours, that's just basically within 1 or 2 constituents, 1 or 2 electorates. This is not the entire district. There's 9 electorates in Kegalle District. So, and things also, like I would like to see some certain parliamentary reforms, such as now I was in the Speaker's Advisory Committee, and then I advocated for for telecasting the committee stages, so committee meetings. So then there was changes to the standing orders, and then now the COP is being telecasted. I think the other committees are also doing some fantastic work, so they also should be telecasted. People think that Parliament is about just debates, and what people have seen is the Miriskudu. But there's another part of Parliament which most people don't know about, and the 90% of the activities in Parliament does not take in the chambers, and sometimes I've been to Parliament where I have not gone into the chamber, but I have engaged in other activities, and all that. So this is a must. That's something which I like to see. But then there are also other things such as let's say like bringing up a private members bill. Now I think it's a long process. You need to advertise in 3 languages and all that, so that process has to be reduced. And where the MPs want to make legislation, then there has to be some sort of a support mechanism. I like to see a budget office in Parliament. Every year for the finance minister comes and presents a beautiful speech with figures which are completely inaccurate in when you take the next year's budget with the actuals. So definitely I would like to see a budget office in Parliament, and I also would like to see that at least a minimum amount of time being given to time restrictions in Parliament. So now sometimes when an important debate comes up, you're given 4 minutes. So now you need to give a more like academic type of speech, and then you also need to make a political statement. So how to include all that within 4 minutes of speaking time is a task. So I think that's the declaration of asset rate. And I think the ministers now they declare their assets to give to the president. Yeah, I don't think I think every year if they're given to the Auditor General's department, and then an assessment is being made whether the increase in or the decrease in the wealth is it can be accepted. Then I think that'll be a good mechanism to start some clean politics somewhere. So
Yeah.
that I mean I can go on with so many changes which I decided. But democracy is a very slow process. So we need to understand that in democracies things change slowly. But as long as I think we are moving in the right direction, and then what we need to do is speed up the process.
Yes. So, Mr. Basura, thank you very much for your time, and good luck at the election.